He left her for his assistant, but at his wedding she arrived with the real surprise: 3 children. Its golden towers gleamed under the sun, yet shadows lingered in the corners of every palace corridor, in the silence between courtly words, and in the hearts of those who walked its marble halls. It was a kingdom where ambition could be as sharp as a dagger, and where love, once broken, left marks deeper than any sword wound. Princess Alara moved through the forest on the edge of the northern realm, the wind carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Her dark cloak clung to her shoulders, a fragile shield against the chill that had nothing to do with weather. Her heart, once vibrant and trusting, had hardened like the stones beneath her feet. In the capital, her name had once been spoken with reverence, and her laughter had echoed in the halls of the palace. But all of that had ended the day Kaelin, the crown prince, had chosen another. Lady Marisel. The name alone was like a knife twisting in her chest. Marisel, with her soft smiles and ambitious eyes, had taken what Alara had thought was hers forever: Kaelin's love, his promises, and the future they had once dreamed of together. Alara had watched from a distance as Kaelin's eyes lost their warmth, replaced by a respect born of obligation rather than passion. She had felt the cruel sting of betrayal, the bitter knowledge that a kingdom's prince could break a heart as easily as he could break a treaty. And yet, even in exile, even among the wilds and shadows of the northern forests, her love had never fully faded. It lingered like a ghost in her chest, a quiet ache that refused to die. The forest was alive with murmurs. Alara had chosen this place for its secrecy and its magic, the ancient kind that no king or queen could command. Here, away from prying eyes, she had built a life, a hidden sanctuary where she and her children could exist in peace. Her 3 children, Aiden with eyes like molten amber, Leora, who carried the wind in her hair and a restless spark in her gaze, and little Kale, who could charm even the most stubborn birds into silence, were her life's secret treasure. None of them knew of the palace's intrigues or the betrayal that had driven their mother away. But they were reminders of what had once been, of a love strong enough to survive even the cruelest abandonment. As she walked, Alara's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden rustle in the underbrush. Her hand instinctively went to the dagger at her waist, a simple weapon enchanted to cut through both flesh and illusion. But it was only a deer, startled by her presence, its large eyes reflecting the dim light of the setting sun. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension slip from her shoulders. In this forest, danger came in many forms, not always from animals but often from memories, from ghosts of the past that refused to remain buried. Alara stopped by a small stream, the water running clear and cold over smooth stones. She knelt, cupping the liquid in her hands. The reflection that stared back at her was not the bright, innocent princess she had once been. Her eyes were sharp, wary, carrying the weight of loss and the burden of protecting 3 lives that depended entirely on her. Yet in that gaze there was also a flicker of something else: defiance. She had survived. She had built a new world out of heartbreak, and in it she was the queen of her own fate. But even queens have their shadows. The wind carried a distant sound, hooves striking stone, faint yet unmistakable. A messenger from the palace, perhaps, or worse, a spy. Alara straightened and looked toward the horizon, where the last light of the day painted the sky in shades of violet and gold. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a thought she had fought to banish: Kaelin, the crown prince, the man who had loved her once, then abandoned her for ambition and convenience. The man whose wedding she had heard was to be held in the very palace she had once called home. She had sworn she would never return. She had sworn she would never let him see the children he did not know existed. And yet with each beat of her heart she knew she could not ignore the summons of fate or the silent pull of unfinished love. Alara's lips pressed together in a thin line. She would go, not for him, not for the court. She would go for her children, for the truth that would soon unfold, for the justice the kingdom had forgotten. The journey back to Asheville was long, and the road itself seemed to whisper warnings. The forests grew denser, the nights darker, and the air heavier with the scent of magic long undisturbed. Alara's children traveled close to her, their small hands gripping hers or each other's, trusting her instinctively, even without knowing the full depth of their heritage. At night they camped beneath the stars. Aidan, older than his years, asked questions about their father, his curiosity sharp yet cautious. Leora twirled a strand of hair around her finger, her sharp mind already sensing the tension that Alara tried to conceal. Little Cale fell asleep quickly, the innocence of youth allowing him to remain untouched by the burdens that weighed so heavily on his mother. "Alara," Aidan said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched between the fire and the whispering trees. "Do you think he will recognize us?" Alara's gaze flickered toward the dark forest line. The answer was uncertain, but she did not want to lie. "He might," she admitted, "but we are not here to be recognized. We are here to remind him of what he lost." The children nodded, each in their own way understanding the unspoken words. They did not yet know the power that slept in their veins, the magic that could bend fate itself if only it were willed. But they would learn. And that knowledge, when the time came, would shake the foundations of the kingdom. The palace gates loomed on the horizon like a golden wall, beautiful and cruel. Alara's breath caught as she saw the banners fluttering in the wind, the courtly guards standing tall and rigid, unaware of the storm that approached. Her heart hammered, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The wedding was to take place in hours, and already the scent of incense and roses drifted toward the outer walls. Alara drew her cloak tighter around her shoulders. She would not rush. She would enter as a shadow, as a mystery, as a force the palace had never expected. The children, silent but aware of her command, followed without question. In their eyes, she saw the reflection of her own strength and the glimmer of hope she had carried all these years. The road narrowed as they approached the main gates. A guard stepped forward, hand on his sword. "Who approaches?" he demanded, his voice sharp and wary. Alara lifted her chin. "A traveler," she said, her tone calm, controlled. "A mother and her children." The guard's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. But something in her voice and the steadiness of her gaze gave him pause. He stepped aside, allowing them passage. Inside the walls, the air was thick with ceremony, laughter, and the tension of unspoken rivalries. And at the heart of it all stood Kaelin. The crown prince, the man whose smile had once set her world ablaze, now dressed in ceremonial gold, radiant and untouchable. He stood beside Marisel, who looked every bit the ambitious, poised, and cunning woman Alara had imagined. Yet as Alara's eyes met his across the courtyard, she saw something she had not expected, a flicker of recognition, of memory, of the love he had once held for her. But he did not yet know. He did not know of the children at her side, the secret she carried like a blade beneath her heart. He could not know, not yet, that his world was about to change forever. Alara took a slow step forward. The wind tugged at her cloak, and the palace seemed to hold its breath. Her children, close to her, mirrored her resolve. This was not merely a return, it was a reckoning. In the distance, a bell tolled, signaling the start of the wedding. Guests turned, curious eyes searching for the bride. But none could have predicted the figure moving through the gates, cloaked in shadow, carrying with her the power of a love abandoned, the strength of 3 lives forged in secrecy, and the promise that the crown prince would never forget the woman he left behind. Alara's lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. The game had begun. The grand hall of Asheville Palace shimmered with gold and candlelight, the air thick with the scent of roses and whispered expectations. Nobles in embroidered robes murmured among themselves, their eyes flicking toward the center aisle where the wedding ceremony would soon begin. Yet even among the carefully arranged guests, none could anticipate the storm that was approaching, not the calm before the thunder, but the thunder itself, cloaked in a woman's quiet strength. Alara stepped into the courtyard, her cloak trailing behind her like a shadow that refused to be ignored. The children followed silently, each holding onto her hand or each other, their small forms nearly swallowed by the grandeur of the palace. Her heart beat steadily, each thump a reminder of the courage it took to return. For years she had hidden in the northern forests, raising her children in secrecy, away from the eyes that had abandoned her. But now the truth demanded to be seen. Kalen, standing beside Marisel, did not immediately notice her. He was focused on the ceremony, rehearsing the words he would say, the promises he had long thought permanent. The flicker of nerves beneath his composed expression betrayed him. When he finally turned, however, and saw Alara at the gates with 3 children he had never known existed, his entire world shifted. Alara's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. The man who had once made her heart soar now looked as if the ground had dropped beneath him. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened, and for the first time in years he looked small, unsure, and human. Marisel's eyes followed his gaze. Her smile faltered, a crack in the carefully maintained mask of confidence. She saw the figure of Alara, once a delicate princess, now a woman carved from resolve and quiet power. The children, standing in perfect alignment behind her, radiated an energy she could not name but instinctively feared. Alara, Kalen's voice was low, almost a whisper. He did not step forward. He did not move. He could not yet comprehend the sight before him. The years of distance and ambition had shielded him from the consequences of his choice, but now the past had returned like a tide, unstoppable and undeniable. Alara raised her head higher. "Kalen," she said, her voice clear and calm, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "You know who I am, and these," she gestured toward her children, "are the proof of what you left behind." Aiden, the eldest, stepped forward bravely. His amber eyes shone with a strange light, a spark that seemed almost alive. Leora and little Kale flanked him, each carrying a quiet confidence that only comes from knowing one's place in the world. Kalen's breath caught in his throat. He had imagined many reunions with Alara, but none like this. None had included 3 children, each a living testament to the life he had forsaken. The guests murmured, unsure whether to gasp in astonishment or retreat in fear. In the court of Asheville, appearances were everything. Alara had arrived without invitation, without warning, and yet her presence demanded attention. She did not seek approval. She did not beg. She simply existed, and that existence carried the weight of years of love, betrayal, and survival. Marisel's hand trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of her gown. Her plans, her careful construction of a future with Kalen, were suddenly in danger. She had anticipated rivals, schemes, even magical interference, but she had not anticipated Alara's quiet power, or the children who moved with a calm confidence that seemed to command the space around them. Kalen, still rooted in place, finally spoke. "Alara, his words faltered. He searched for the right expression, the right explanation, but none came. He could see the truth reflected in the eyes of the children, the undeniable, unarguable truth that he had chosen wrong. His pride, ambition, and fear of inadequacy had led him to abandon a love that had been real, lasting, and pure. Alara's gaze never wavered. "Do not speak yet, Kalen. Listen first. Watch first. Understand what you left behind before you try to speak of it." Her voice carried authority, a quiet command that startled him more than any accusation could have. The hall had grown silent. Guests stared, unsure how to react. Some whispered of magic, others murmured about scandal. But all eyes were fixed on the trio of children, who now began to show subtle signs of the power that Alara had always known they possessed. Aiden lifted his hand, and a small flame danced above his palm, burning without smoke or heat. Leora's hair floated gently, as if moved by an unseen wind, and Kale's soft voice caused the tiny candle flames to sway rhythmically, bending to his will. Kaelin's eyes widened. He had heard stories of the northern forests, of magic that lingered in forgotten places, but seeing it in the children of the woman he had left, was something altogether different. He felt fear, awe, and something far more complex, regret that clawed at his chest. Alara stepped closer to the aisle, keeping her children close. "You see them, Kaelin. These are your children, whether you know it or not. And whether you accept it or not, they belong to this world, to this kingdom, and to me." Marisel tried to intervene, her voice sharp and commanding. "This is impossible. You cannot simply—" But Alara silenced her with a glance, the kind of glance that could bend a nobleman's pride to dust. "Do not speak. You are not part of this life. You do not get to control it now." The wedding guests were frozen in place, caught between awe and fear. The air seemed to thrum with energy, a subtle pulse that made the candles flicker and the floor beneath them hum softly. Something ancient stirred in the palace, a power awakened by the presence of Alara and her children. The court had not seen anything like this in decades, perhaps centuries. Kaelin took a tentative step forward, but Alara raised a hand, and her children mirrored the gesture subtly, a silent instruction. Aiden's flame dimmed slightly, Leora's hair settled, and Kael's whispered words softened the tremor in the hall. It was a display of control, of harmony, and a warning. They were powerful, and their power was tied to the truth Kaelin had ignored for so long. Kaelin began again, his voice strained. He searched her eyes, hoping for some hint of mercy, some trace of the love he had once known. But Alara's eyes held only clarity and quiet fire. She had loved him, yes, but that love had transformed into something stronger: protection, resilience, and the courage to face a world that had once turned its back on her. Alara's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Kaelin, you have a choice to make. You can acknowledge what is here, or you can pretend it does not exist. But the kingdom will see, and the truth cannot be hidden forever." Marisel stepped back, realizing that the carefully constructed wedding could not proceed. The power that Alara and her children radiated was undeniable. Her plans were crumbling, her influence slipping. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her ambition against the reality of Alara's presence. Kaelin's mind raced. He could see the consequences of his choices, the lives affected, the love he had thrown away. Yet he also feared the court's judgment, the wrath of his advisors, and the loss of his reputation. And still, beneath all of it, was the undeniable truth. He had left the only woman who had ever truly understood him. The tension in the hall was unbearable. Every whisper, every glance, every hesitant movement carried the weight of anticipation. The guests did not know what would happen next, but they knew it would be extraordinary. Alara lowered her hand, and the children stepped forward slightly, a quiet display of solidarity. The message was clear. They were a family, bound by love, magic, and the undeniable claim of truth. Kaelin could no longer pretend. He could no longer hide. The first chime of the wedding bell sounded, marking the moment when vows would normally be exchanged. But this time, the air shifted. The flame in Aiden's hand flared unexpectedly, sending sparks across the marble floor. Leora's hair rose with a life of its own, brushing against the faces of the nobles nearby. And Kael's voice, soft but insistent, carried over the hall, bending the very air with an invisible force. The guests gasped. Kaelin froze. The ceremony halted. Marisel's face went pale. The court, so accustomed to order and appearances, had been forced to witness something beyond control, something extraordinary and undeniably true. Alara took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering from Kaelin's. "This is your family," she said softly but firmly. "And the life you abandoned is standing right here before you." Kaelin's chest tightened. He felt 1,000 emotions at once: fear, awe, regret, longing, and something that had lain dormant for years: hope. He could see the courage in Alara, the brilliance in his children, and the undeniable bond that linked them all together. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to reach out, but the words caught in his throat. He could only stand there, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. And in that silence, the storm of past betrayal and future possibilities hung over the hall, ready to break at any moment. The storm had passed, but Asheville Palace did not return to its normal rhythm. The corridors, once filled with polite laughter and measured footsteps, now hummed with whispers and cautious glances. Nobles spoke in hushed tones, uncertain of what they had witnessed. Magic power they could neither control nor understand had manifested openly during the wedding ceremony. And at the center of it all stood Ilara and her children, calm and resolute, like the eye of a hurricane in a sea of uncertainty. Kalen paced the grand hall, hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The crown prince, so often composed in matters of state, now felt the full weight of regret pressing upon him. Every choice he had made, every ambition that had guided him away from Alara, now seemed hollow. His mind refused to accept the reality that stared him in the face. She had returned, not as a forgotten love, but as a force stronger than he had ever imagined. Alara watched him from across the room, her gaze unwavering. She had always known that Kaelin's pride and ambition would clash with the truth she carried. She did not seek vengeance, yet she was not afraid to wield the power of the truth. Her children, too, stood firm beside her, their small bodies radiating quiet strength. They were more than reminders of love lost. They were the living proof of resilience, courage, and magic intertwined. Aiden stepped forward, his flame gently flickering in his palm as if mirroring his thoughts. "Father," he said softly, testing the word, we are your children." His voice held no accusation, only the innocent certainty of truth. Kaelin froze. The word children resonated differently in this hall than it ever had in any royal council. He could see their faces, each one reflecting a part of the woman he had left behind, and a part of himself he had tried to forget. Alara inclined her head slightly. "Kaelin," she said, calm yet commanding, "they are not here to punish you. They are here to show you the consequences of your choices and the lives that you left in your absence." Kaelin's throat tightened. Words failed him. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to take back years of mistakes, but the truth was heavier than any apology could carry. He had chosen ambition over love. He had left behind a family, a life, and now he stood in a hall where the consequences were alive and undeniable. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Courtiers shuffled nervously, unsure of how to respond. Maricel's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing as she realized the depth of the power Alara possessed. The careful plans she had built around Kaelin, around the wedding, and around the illusion of control were unraveling before her eyes. "Alara," Kaelin finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "Why now? Why come here at this moment? You could have remained hidden." Alara's eyes softened briefly, just enough to reveal the years of pain she had endured. "Because now is the moment when truth cannot be denied," she replied. "Because now, the lives you ignored are here, and they deserve to be seen. They deserve a father who understands what was lost, and perhaps what can still be repaired." Kaelin swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of his own guilt pressing against him. He had imagined scenarios like this, moments when he might confront his past mistakes, but none had felt as urgent, as real, or as impossible to navigate. He had to face not just Alara, but the children who embodied the love he had abandoned. Aiden's flame flickered once more, illuminating the hall with a soft, golden glow. Leora's hair floated gently around her shoulders, responding subtly to the tension in the room, and Kael's soft voice hummed, bending the air in quiet harmony with his siblings. It was as if the children, without realizing it, were amplifying the emotions in the room, weaving their own magic into the hearts of those around them. Alara moved closer, her presence calm but commanding. "Kaelin, there is something you must understand. Our family is not just the sum of our choices, but the bond we share. The magic in the northern forests, the strength in our hearts, it all comes from love. Love that endures even in absence, even in betrayal." Kaelin looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years he saw her not as the delicate princess he had once adored, but as a woman of power, resilience, and unwavering courage. She had survived. She had thrived. And she had raised 3 children who were more than proof of their lineage. They were living embodiments of the love he had abandoned. Kaelin began, his voice faltering. He wanted to speak words of apology, words of explanation, words that could somehow undo the years of absence. But none of those words could capture the depth of his regret, the magnitude of the moment, or the awe he felt at the presence of the woman who had refused to crumble. Alara tilted her head slightly, sensing his hesitation. She did not push, did not demand, only waited. She had always believed that truth, presented clearly and without fear, would be impossible to ignore. And now she saw it reflected in Kaelin's eyes, recognition, remorse, and perhaps a flicker of longing. A sudden movement drew their attention. Marisel, desperate to regain control of the situation, stepped forward. "This is absurd," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the hall. "You cannot simply, this is a wedding. This is a ceremony of order." Alara's gaze hardened, and the children subtly mirrored her posture, a silent display of unity and control. Aiden's flame burned brighter, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Leora's hair lifted slightly, as if catching the tension in the room, and Kael's gentle hum resonated through the floor. The effect was subtle, yet undeniable. Marisel froze, realizing that her power in this moment was no match for the unity of Alara and her children. The court held its breath, sensing the shift in balance. For the first time, the nobility understood that this was not a matter of argument or persuasion. It was a display of truth and presence that demanded acknowledgement. Kaelin stepped closer, drawn by a force he could not name. His hands trembled slightly, but he raised them, as if in surrender. He began, and then stopped, realizing that words alone could not express the complexity of his emotions. He looked at the children, at Aiden, Leora, and Kael, and felt the weight of his absence. He had missed birthdays, first steps, and quiet moments that could never be recovered. And yet, here they were, alive and radiant, standing before him with the quiet strength of those who had survived without him. Alara's eyes softened again, a hint of the woman he had loved shining through the armor of strength she had built around herself. "Kaelin," she said gently, "you cannot change the past, but you can choose what comes next. You can choose to face it, to acknowledge it, to embrace what has been hidden, or you can walk away and lose us again." Kaelin's chest tightened. He felt the enormity of the choice before him. He could retreat into the safety of the palace, into the life he had built with Marisel, and pretend that the past had no claim on him. Or he could step forward, face the consequences, and attempt to rebuild what had been broken. The thought terrified him, yet it also stirred a flicker of hope he had long buried. Aiden's flame danced higher, casting long shadows along the walls. Leora's hair lifted gently, catching the air with a subtle grace, and Kael's soft voice resonated like a quiet drumbeat, marking the rhythm of truth in the room. The children, unknowingly, were weaving a spell of clarity and revelation, forcing the court, Kaelin, and even Marisel to see what could no longer be hidden. Kaelin's eyes met Alara's, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. He had made mistakes, great mistakes, but the love that had once bound them had not vanished entirely. It lingered, quiet yet insistent, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Alara took a deep breath. "The curse that has haunted Asheville for generations is tied to choices like yours, Kaelin. Love ignored, hearts abandoned, promises broken. It all feeds the shadows that linger in this palace." But there is a way to heal, if one is willing to face the truth and take responsibility. Kaelin's pulse quickened. The weight of the crown of the kingdom, of the years of decisions both political and personal, pressed upon him. And yet beneath it all he felt a spark of determination. He had been given a second chance, not just with Alara but with the children, with the family he had lost. "I will not fail again," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "I will do what is needed to protect you, to protect them, to protect what we have lost." Alara's lips curved slightly, a mix of relief and cautious hope. She did not speak immediately, letting the weight of the moment settle, letting Kaelin feel the depth of the choice he had made. The children, sensing the shift, relaxed subtly, their magic becoming gentle and steady rather than wild and reactive. Marisol stepped back, her face pale, her plans shattered. She realized that control was no longer hers, that influence could not override truth, and that the bond between Alara, Kaelin, and the children was something she could neither manipulate nor destroy. The hall remained silent, yet the air thrummed with anticipation. The storm had passed, but a new reckoning was beginning. Kaelin had faced his past, and the path forward was uncertain, but it was alive with possibility, with redemption, and with the chance to reclaim what had been lost. The palace of Asheville had never been so alive with tension. The tremor from the night before had left whispers in every corridor, casting shadows that danced unnaturally in the candlelight. Nobles spoke of omens, of magic, of powers unseen in generations. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a single truth shone brighter than the gilded walls. The bond between Alara, her children, and Kaelin could no longer be ignored. Kaelin paced the grand hall, the weight of the crown heavy on his shoulders. The past months had pressed down upon him relentlessly, years of ambition, neglect, and broken promises now demanding reckoning. He had been given a second chance, but this chance carried a burden unlike any treaty or alliance he had ever signed. He had to prove, not with words but with action, that the love he had abandoned could be restored. Alara stood at the center of the hall, her children close at hand. The three of them radiated quiet power, their small forms commanding the room without arrogance or fear. Aiden's flame flickered gently in his palm, a reminder of control and potential. Leora's hair moved softly as if guided by unseen winds, a reflection of her calm and focused energy. Little Kale hummed, and the vibrations resonated through the stone floors, harmonizing with the subtle magic of the palace. Together, they were a force that neither words nor weapons could diminish. Kaelin approached cautiously, his steps deliberate. "Alara," he said softly, voice steady though weighted with emotion, "I cannot undo the years I lost, but I swear to you I will protect this family. I will protect you and them, no matter what comes." Alara's eyes softened, a mixture of relief and wary hope shining through. She had always known Kaelin's heart, had always sensed the depth beneath his pride and ambition. But she also knew that words alone could not heal the wounds of years. Trust had to be rebuilt, step by careful step. The tremor from the previous night had stirred more than whispers. It had awakened the ancient magic that slept within the walls of Asheville. The palace itself seemed aware of the intentions of those within it, its stones humming with anticipation, reacting to the honesty, courage, and love now present. Aiden, sensing his father's sincerity, stepped forward. His small hand glowed with controlled fire. "Father," he said, voice clear, "if you are truly ready to protect us, you must prove it. The palace, it listens. It will judge your heart." Kaelin nodded, understanding that the test was not only of magic but of character. The tremor had been more than a warning. It was a call to action. To restore balance to Asheville, to heal the fractured bonds, and to reclaim what had been lost, he had to face not just the consequences of his choices, but also the shadows that lingered in the palace itself. Alara stepped forward beside him. "The curse that lingers in Asheville is not just a story," she said softly. "It is real. It feeds on neglect, on broken promises, on hearts abandoned, but it can be healed through love, unity, and courage. Kalen felt a shiver run through him. He had heard tales of the curse in his childhood, stories told in hushed voices by the palace servants. But until now, he had never truly believed it could be alive, reacting to the choices of those who walked its halls. Now, faced with the undeniable proof, Alara and their children, he understood the weight of his failure and the power of redemption. The children moved subtly, forming a triangle around their parents, their magic harmonizing in a rhythm that filled the hall with soft light and gentle vibrations. The air shimmered and Kalen could feel it. The palace itself was alive, awaiting the decision that could either restore or destroy Asheville. Alara's voice broke the silence. Kalen, are you willing to face it? To face the shadows of the past and the consequences of your choices? He swallowed hard, then nodded firmly. Yes, whatever it takes, I will not fail again. The tremor grew and the walls of the palace shivered. Candles flickered, tapestries swayed, and a low hum filled the air. The curse had sensed the intention, the honesty, the courage, the willingness to act, but it demanded more than words. It demanded proof. Kalen turned to face the heart of the palace, where a large crystal hung above the throne, its surface darkened with the weight of past misdeeds. The crystal pulsed faintly, as if alive, reflecting the turmoil and the potential for redemption. He stepped forward, heart pounding, and raised his hands toward it. Alara's voice guided him softly, steady and unwavering. Focus on what is true, on what is real, on the love that has endured. Let that guide you. Kalen closed his eyes. He thought of the years lost, of the family he had abandoned, of the children who had grown in secret, and of the woman who had never given up. The warmth of memory, the ache of regret, and the spark of hope coalesced in his chest. He opened his hands, letting the energy flow toward the crystal. A soft light began to spread from the crystal, filling the hall with a gentle glow. The tremor subsided into a hum, steady and harmonious. The palace seemed to breathe, responding to the sincerity of Kalen's heart. The curse, ancient and relentless, began to unravel, its shadows retreating in the face of genuine love and courage. Alara stepped closer to him, her children forming a protective circle around them. It is not enough to act for yourself, she said. You must act for all of us. For the family, for the kingdom, for Asheville itself. Kalen nodded, understanding that this was not just about redemption, but about responsibility. He placed his hands on the crystal, feeling its cool surface beneath his palms. He focused, not on power or control, but on love, unity, and the bond that could never be broken. The light intensified, spreading through every corridor, every tower, every shadowed corner of the palace. Nobles and servants alike gasped as the darkness that had lingered for centuries began to fade. The whispers of the curse, once constant and chilling, softened into silence. Aiden's flame danced brightly, Leora's hair floated gently as if in celebration, and Kale's voice resonated in harmony with the magic of the palace. The children's presence had been the key. They were not only witnesses to the past, but also catalysts for the future. Kalen turned to Alara, his eyes filled with awe and humility. It's done, he whispered. The curse, it's gone, we've done it. Alara smiled, a mixture of relief and joy shining through. Not just us, she said, all of us together. That is the power that sustains Asheville, and that will sustain our family. Marisol, watching from the side, felt the weight of her ambition crumble. The palace had chosen its truth, and she could not alter the course that had been set. She stepped back silently, realizing that some powers could not be controlled by schemes or deception. They could only be guided by love and courage. Kalen took Alara's hand, holding it firmly, reverently. I will never leave again, he said softly. I understand now what matters. You, the children, our family. Nothing else is worth losing it. Alara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She had waited for years to hear those words, and now They were finally spoken with the sincerity and depth he had once lacked. She leaned slightly closer, the warmth of his presence stirring memories long buried. "Actions speak louder than words, Kaelin," she said gently, "and you have shown me that today." The children moved closer, surrounding both parents in a small circle of trust and love. Aiden's flame flickered warmly, Leora's hair settled in calm waves, and Kale's gentle hum filled the air with peace. The family, reunited, radiated a power that was both human and magical, a force that promised protection, harmony, and hope for the kingdom. Kalen knelt slightly, placing himself among them, acknowledging the bond he had once ignored. "I have been blind," he admitted, "but now I see, and I will do everything in my power to protect this family, to honor the love I have for you, Alara, and for our children." Alara's hand rested on his shoulder, steady and firm. "Then let us move forward," she said, her voice carrying quiet authority. "Together as a family, and let Asheville feel the strength of unity, courage, and love once more." Outside the palace, the sun broke through clouds that had lingered for days. The kingdom of Asheville, once shadowed by neglect and the weight of an ancient curse, now basked in light, reborn and renewed. The tremors and whispers of the past had faded, replaced by harmony, hope, and the promise of a future shaped by choice, courage, and love. Kaelin, standing beside Alara, watched as their children laughed softly, the sound carrying through the palace halls. It was a sound of innocence, of trust, and of magic that had been nurtured with care. He realized that this laughter, this family, was the true crown he had been meant to protect all along. Alara turned toward him, eyes shining with warmth and quiet triumph. "The past has shaped us," she said softly, "but it does not define us. Together, we are stronger than anything the kingdom or the curse could throw at us." Kaelin smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile he had not worn in years. "Then let us reclaim our kingdom, our family, and our future," he said. "Together." The palace seemed to hum in agreement, as if every stone, every tapestry, every corner that had witnessed years of shadows now acknowledged the power of unity and love. The curse had been confronted, the family restored, and Asheville itself had been given a second chance. And in the center of it all stood Alara and Kaelin, hand in hand, surrounded by the children who had been their strength, their proof, and their future. The kingdom would remember this day, not for scandal, ambition, or betrayal, but for the redemption of a family, the reclamation of love, and the quiet, unstoppable power of truth.